Okay. Good day. Good day, everyone, joining from all around the continent and perhaps all around the world. Welcome to our report launch and our AIRA talks on the unseen electorate, how social media algorithms affect voting in Africa. We're so excited to have you here. This report has been conducted rigorously, thoroughly, not thoroughly, thoroughly, expertly, professionally by the team at CC Hub. And I just want us to, they haven't presented findings or anything, but it's a good time to use our emojis to clap for them. It's a fantastic, fantastic, fantastic piece of work. And I can't wait for everybody to read the report. And most of the people here know already that our current electoral landscape, not just in Africa, all around the world, there's a whole social media algorithm crisis where it's in itself is an electoral infrastructure that is unscrutinable or scrutinizable. And if it's not scrutinizable, there's little to no accountability that we can hold it to. And so this report really does go into across several countries in Africa and specifically has a social media listening experiment, which I found very interesting across Kenya, Namibia, Nigeria, and Uganda. And I can't
Hi,
present the
Deborah. I
findings.
think there's a feedback from your end. There's a lot of echo.
Okay. Can anybody else
Yeah.
hear the echo?
No,
No. Okay.
we can hear you clearly,
Okay.
Yeah,
Adebora. No,
clearly, no echo.
Okay.
That
Thank you, Yvonne, for the feedback though, but I think yeah, it might not be from my end. So the panel it will talk us through the report and other issues, and I in a few minutes welcome our moderator to then welcome the panel. But I just wanted to say welcome to everyone. My name is Adebora Otolami, and I am the coordinator for the African Internet Rights Alliance. We are an alliance of 10 organizations that span across sub-Saharan Africa, working together for the prosperity of rights and technologies on the continent. And we're very happy to have you here. In a few minutes, I will also, or during the session, I will also share our social media pages, our LinkedIn pages, our website, and of course, you would also have access to the report at the end. Please do engage our content, sign up to our newsletter, lots and lots of information on our newsletters, lots of opportunities as well. And now let me welcome our moderator of the day, Miriam Beatrice Wanjiru. I'll read her short bio. Miriam is a public policy practitioner whose work sits at the intersection of digital rights, AI governance, and the digital political economy. Her research and practice examine how power, policy, and emerging technologies shape civic space, platform accountability, and inclusive digital transformation across East Africa and beyond. She serves as a multi-stakeholder advisory group member of the Kenya Internet Governance Forum and sits on the board of Goal for Initiative. Academically, she holds a Bachelor of Arts in Public Policy and a master's degree in International Studies. She also holds certification in AI law, policy, and governance from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Well, and another thing that's not in her bio is that she's an excellent, excellent speaker, intelligent. She always has such a sound contribution to conversation. So, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together as we welcome our moderator.
Well, Adeboro, the pressure is getting worse. I don't know where you got that bio, but thank you very much for the warm introduction. It's a pleasure being here. I have been participating in AIRA talks, but as a participant, and it's a pleasure to be a moderator today. My name, as you've heard, is Miriam Beatrice Wanjiru. I am so glad to drive this conversation for a number of reasons. I am a voter. I am someone who's really passionate about human rights and digital rights. And we really, really must have the conversation around elections in the digital age. So help me welcome all of you. And as we wait for a few more people to join, just say a quick hi on the chat box, where you're from, the organization you're representing, if you're comfortable, and the country And also, since we're talking about elections, how many times have you voted? We won't count your age. We promise we will not count your age. But how many times have you participated in voting? But without further ado, Adeboro has kicked us off to what will be an enriching conversation in the next 1 hour, 20 minutes or so. We'll be discussing about the findings of what I found to be such an illuminating report. I've had the pleasure of going through the report on how social media algorithms are affecting voting in Africa. And just to set the pace and to set the foundation for this chat before I introduce our panelists, I mean, we all know that historically, for the longest time, and I'm curious to see how many times you have participated in any voting process, particularly national elections. We've known elections to be, contests between individuals, contests between political parties, contests between ideologies. Unfortunately, in the country that I come from, sometimes it's contests between members of different tribes. But now, increasingly, over the last couple of years, we are seeing another actor that has entered in the chat box. And from this report, they're calling it the invisible electorate, an unseen electorate. Curious to see what informed that name, but I think it's brilliant. And it might not necessarily be voting, casting a vote at the ballot box, but it's 100% influencing how people vote. So in the next 1 hour, 20 minutes, we'll just be speaking, and seeing how citizens across the continent should be concerned, how we can best be prepared, what systems we need to put in place, what policies we need to put in place. And really, we'll just be answering the question on, we have an idea that technology is influencing elections, but how exactly is technology influencing elections? And so that's the paramount question that we'll be answering. Trying to see whether there's a bit of I can see a few people, introducing themselves. Feel free to say a quick hi. And I hope my internet will not fail me. I'm really hoping my internet will not fail me. But if it does, Adeboro will do this co-moderation with you. In case my internet fails, Adeboro will be on standby. We can do this co-moderation work together. That said, help me welcome our panelists. I'll just give them a minute to say hi as we check your mic, whether your mic is working. I'll start with you, David. Say hi, what you do. And how many times have you voted in national elections? Again, we're not counting your age.
Thanks, Miriam. My name is Oluwaseun Adegboju. I'm a managing partner with Co-Creation Hub. It's great to be here. I manage all our work in tech and society, frontier technology that borders on AI and emerging tech. I also support all our work in healthcare and our CC Hub Design Lab in Rwanda. It's great to be here. I put in the chat I voted for president. Yeah.
Well, you are the OG. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Yvonne, quick hi, who are you? What do you do? How many times have you voted? How many presidents have you voted in or out?
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Yvonne. I work as a senior programs manager for governance and civic resilience at the Technology and Society practice at TC Hall. I have voted in 4 elections, but unfortunately voted in 2 presidents. Thank you.
Okay, there's a story there. Unfortunately, voted into president. Okay, thank you so much for sharing. I'm trying to see who else is here. Moving, I saw you earlier. Just a quick hi. If you're comfortable, let's see you on camera for better engagement. Yes, there you go.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Movin Omondi. I'm also part of the Cooperation Hub. I work as a research associate based out of Nairobi. It's a pleasure to meet you here. I have voted actually twice. I'm not sure if I have voted a president in, but I voted a couple of MPs maybe. It's interesting to have you here. As I've said, I work in the research department at Corporation Hub across multiple formats, including digital, creative economy, and the rest. So I look forward for nice engagement. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing, and welcome to everyone. In case you're joining, this is a webinar where we'll be launching the latest report. And feel free to share a quick hi, say your name, the organization you're representing, and if you're comfortable, how many presidents you've voted in and how many presidents you've voted out. I will tell you how many times I've voted, but at the end of this webinar. So stick around to get that number. Now, let's get this party started. And I'll start with you, David. I was particularly drawn to the title of the report. So I want you to talk to us about what informed the name of the report, the unseen electorate. Who is this unseen electorate that has just joined the WhatsApp chat? What informed that? What was the thinking process behind that?
Thank you so much. And welcome to everyone on the call. I think the main reason that for the topic of this research on sin electorate is looking at a lot of detrimental effect of technology with elections on the continent. And I think there's no better time to have that conversation and to dig deeper about that than now, looking at how people have devices in their hands. They assume they have control of what they get from that device, but somebody somewhere is seated somewhere with an agenda that actually programs whatever they get out of that device they are holding, either in their thoughts towards a candidate or in their final decision making in electioneering. And it's very important for us to dig deeper, looking at how people are automatically disenfranchised by algorithms. And sometimes very subtly, like they are not aware that they are being programmed or they are being disenfranchised, just by interacting with digital technologies or social media platform. And this also became a thing because social media is becoming the platform that is getting more attention, that people visit more than traditional media. So this is very important because many people, even those who felt they are part of the participating electorate, they are actually part of the unseen electorate. And there are many reasons why we have a lot of unseen electorates. Number one are the rural and low bandwidth communities whose engagement patterns don't optimize for virality, right? If your participation in the social media space or in the platform space does not lead to anything that goes viral, you're already disenfranchised, or speakers of minority languages, right? If you engage platforms with a language that does not encourage micro targeting by big platforms during election seasons, you are already disenfranchised. But also communities with low, engagement scores, right? When it comes to, some people read, they don't react, and they are not taking part in even reactionary spectrums to any of election micro-targeting information on any platform, with no particular platform in particular. They are also unseen electorate. But it's that person that their thinking cap was automatically or without knowing was removed from them by machines without them knowing. That is an unseen electorate. And that's what led to the title of this research. And as we speak more, we can see the different ligaments of how this unseen electorate system plays out, especially from algorithmic standpoint.
Oof, thank you. Thank you so much, David. When you say thinking cap has been altered without knowing, I would want to ask whether you're saying that, voters now completely don't have the agency, or the agency has completely been removed by technology, but we'll come to that conversation a bit later. Again, just on foundations, Moving, you're part of the study. What I also found to be interesting is the methodology, the mixed methodology that you employed. Talk to us about that. Why did you choose that set of systems for the study, and also spend a little bit time on social media listening, which I think went on for about 75 days. And for someone who doesn't know what this is, please let us know the difference between that and surveilling. Were you surveilling on Kenyans and Nigerians? So what exactly was that? Talk to us about it.
Yes, thanks so much, Miriam. It's a pleasure. I think I will just basically pick from where my colleague Oloshion left from. It's this social media dancing electorate is something very intriguing. I will definitely go deeper into the process, but I just wanted to create a scenario from what Shion said. That imagine yourself, even after this meeting, it's a lengthy meeting, probably you had a long day, and then you show up on your phone, maybe to just see what's happening on Instagram or on X or any other platforms. We realize that we never really know who put whatever we're actually going to access there. You just consume whatever you find there. So this is the logic of algorithms. Basically, the algorithms study your activities, they study your behaviors, and then they recommend, actually, basically, put it bluntly, push content to your feeds. And on X and TikTok especially, we normally have a space on there called For You page. So that is where the algorithms specifically target you. I think that's what Chun was saying, micro-targeting, but they're actually able to curate content to you. Some people have even said that if you speak, sometimes they can actually capture what you're saying and start getting some ads. Let's say you say, I need a new pair of shoes. All of a sudden you see Nike pushing all sorts of shoes to you. But now when we come to elections, so you can imagine that in the context of politics, whereby people are actually sharing ideas online. And what we've actually discovered currently is that digital is actually becoming more important than even traditional. For example, recently the Media Council of Kenya released their survey, which shows that for the first time, more Kenyans actually consider social media as their main news source compared to TV and radio. Actually, about 37%, I think, consider social media as a main news source. So I'm just going to request that I share my screen briefly so that I can actually take us through the process that probably we are talking about, the social media algorithm, social media listening, and the rest. Just a minute.
Okay, thank you. And if you're just joining, welcome. Yvonne, be on standby. I'm coming to you next. Moving, if you're having a bit of change, let us know as well.
Yeah, I'm just trying to share. Whether I have the rights to share. I think I do. Please just let me know if you can all see my screen.
In 3, 2, 2.5, 1. Yeah, we can.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. So what's happening, what we did is that we actually approached this study through mixed method approach, which essentially from a research perspective is where you take various routes to try to see if they will lead you to a scientific destination, to just sort of account for the weaknesses of different approaches. So the first thing we did is we actually did a thorough literature review. What is the existing knowledge on how algorithms affect elections and voter behaviors and people in general? And what we realized, majority of these studies actually don't necessarily focus on Africa, but still they were important for our work because you have to sort of set a basis. After that, we also had a couple of interviews, at least 6 with different players across the continent to just try to figure out what the technicians think about this and the trends that they're observing in the industry. Then we finally conducted a Pan-African workshop with multiple people. It was actually about 30 plus people, who a majority of them were digital creators, digital leaders, activists, people who do digital advocacy works and all those kind of things. And then we were able to see a pattern that was quite interesting, that a lot of people believe actually from their work that social media algorithms and social media particularly is very important in the current phenomenon of elections and politics. And then finally, the one that I think Miriam was alluding to, the social media listening. Social media listening generally is a process whereby you leverage existing content on social media. So essentially, you can either use it by actually just observing the secondary data that is already available, whereby people are putting are sharing comments. So you basically study what is existing. The one thing that makes our approach unique is that we created new accounts across the 3 regions. And the reason for that is that we wanted to actually sort of we wanted to study the more of like a causality, but I wouldn't call it causality, but try to link directly algorithms with, content that goes to users' feed. So we were able to have the grace of 8 Africans in the 4 countries of study who created accounts. Let me use the word dummy accounts, and we monitor those accounts for 75 days. We had 2 people in Kenya, 2 in Nigeria, 2 in Namibia, and 2 in Uganda. And what we did is that one of them created political account and another one created non-political. So how we were able to do that is that when you are creating a new X account, for example, they normally ask for your preferences. So you can say maybe you are interested in football. So based on that, the algorithm actually try to channel content to you based on those preferences. And what we did with the political, those people went crazy on politics. Like people said, they love party politics, they love elections. I think those preferences are always there. But for non-political, they actually mention things that are very remote, totally out of scope of politics, like football, nature, things that for you to connect them to politics, you must really struggle a lot. And then after that, what we did is that we observed those accounts. We were able to gather data that was shared to those accounts in terms of feeds, and then we analyze those feeds and observe the dynamics. So we basically use AI modeling to actually look at the trends, what people are receiving. As I said earlier, social media was already overtaking the mainstream media in terms of news consumption. And news media actually shapes what society thinks. So the argument here is not necessarily that social media algorithms make people vote in a particular way, but it actually influences them. I think there's a theory called media theory, which is exposure to media over a long time actually will actually influence your thinking. So the key findings from this analysis is that political content is actually amplified by algorithms. And what this means is that it didn't matter what the study participants indicated, they still got political content in. So essentially, you'd find someone who created an account and say that they're interested in furniture, all those kind of things. They still got almost equal amount of political content on their feeds, just slightly less compared to people who are extremely political. So this is, I think a lot of us, we like saying that I don't care, I'm not interested in politics. Algorithms don't really care about that. They'll still push to you content. Something else that you can see here is that political content is pushed more by the social media algorithms than non-political. For example, 2.5 times to between 2.5 times to 3.7 times across the study countries. It is highest Uganda. So, for example, if someone was to put out a political content, that content will be pushed 3.7 times more in Uganda than a non-political content. That means that the algorithm is heavily political. Something else that we found is the substantiality of that particular political content actually is an issue because the algorithms favors shallow or non-policy heavy content. So as you can see here, whenever content that was posted was policy heavy or substantive, the algorithm reduced visibility for that content by up to 66% in Uganda. The trend is almost same in Namibia, Kenya, and Nigeria. And this begs the question of how substantial are conversations online. And these conversations, basically, the social media algorithms do not essentially enable substantive conversation. So it's not really. Let me put it this way: it's not try to tell people that you should have constructive conversations on media. It's counterproductive because essentially, even if you try to post very constructive things, let's say you are a civic society organization, just know that if a politician posts something that is very controversial, yours will actually be swallowed. Then finally, something else that we also found is the issue around attention inequality, meaning that a few political accounts actually dominate most conversations. In most countries, the Gini coefficient was actually 0.78. So you find a very small number of accounts actually dominate 78% of the conversation. That means that the space is very narrow. So you might have a lot of young people who are very progressive, but their content won't get in. The content that will get somewhere with contents from a few political accounts. And the thing with this is that it gives an opportunity for political operatives, politicians basically, to buy operatives who actually can dominate the platforms and share whatever they want to share and actually kill what majority would have said. And then this also, of course, affects civil society, because if you cannot match the politicians with the resources, then you are left to the back end of the conversation. Finally, something else that is also most troubling, actually, out of all these findings for me, is that the
Yes,
algorithms unfortunately favor
finally.
negative content. Yes, they favor negative content more than positive political content. So, for example, negative political content got at least more, almost twice impressions of positive, yet they're actually at half of them. So those are some of the findings that we found. I'm curious to learn what you guys think about it. But the point is that the algorithms, they do not simply distribute political information. They actively shapes who gets seen, what we see, and what voters emotionally respond. So this is the realities that Africans go to elections with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Movin, for that breakdown. There are so many things you've mentioned that just were mind-blowing. I really like the tag that you use. The algorithm is heavily political. The algorithm is not neutral, but then it also responds to the emotions of voters. So are we blaming the system? Are we also, because we are the ones who are responding to these things, or is it vice versa? But that was brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. I want to invite Yvonne. Yvonne, hi. Thanks for joining. And I know you're really at the central of putting together this report. But as you're going through the findings, I'm just curious, as a researcher and as a thought leader in the space, what are some of the things that really stood out for you? You can give us three examples from all the countries that you looked into. What stood out for you?
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us. I think a lot of things stood out for me, but specifically the fact that algorithm is now an electoral infrastructure in Africa that we must take seriously, and that election management bodies must take seriously. If you look at how elections have been run in most countries, especially in 2024, which was declared as the year of democracy, because we had a lot of countries going to election in 2024. You could see that there was rising misinformation, disinformation, manipulation of the electoral process, campaign processes, and all that, which borders on electoral integrity, transparency, and how inclusivity of voters is being shaped in Africa. So for me, I think this is something that electoral management bodies must take seriously, that algorithm or social media engagement, or how we use social media for digital campaigns to reach electorates, should now be considered as an infrastructure, and frameworks must be put in place by electoral bodies to ensure that everything that would, at the end of the day, lead to transparency of election in Nigeria is put at the forefront of, sorry, not in Nigeria, I mean in Africa, is put at the forefront, um, because of the low voter turnout we are seeing. For instance, in most African countries that held election between 2024 and 2026, we are seeing that there has been a drop in voters turnout, not because citizens don't want to vote, but because there is lack of trust, there is lack of transparency, and just a lot of things that is going on. So I think for me, from what the report has shown, we need to take our infrastructure seriously, electoral management body in particular, and also the rise or the stemming of misinformation and disinformation would also be successful if electoral management bodies, political organizations, human rights defenders can take into cognizance the role that social media play in election campaigns and election processes. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And you're just ushering us right into the second part of this conversation, which is let's start talking solutions because we are seeing all these problems. Let's start talking solutions. But I'm curious to see whether there's anyone who would want to ask a question at this point. If you need to, feel free to drop on the chat or ask to be, we'll allow you to speak. And thank you for everyone who shared how many times they voted. Someone said very many times without mentioning a number. Well, thanks for sharing. And in case you're just joining, we are having a conversation around the latest report on technology and elections and just looking at the unseen electorate. I am trying to see whether there are questions at this point, and if not, Moses Opio, thank you so much for joining. I actually really enjoy the Sunday publication, the Tech Policy Advisory. Now it's paid. I don't get to see it, but yeah, this comes from a fan. Thanks so much for joining. And I can see a few more people saying how many times they voted. I'll still tell you how many times I've voted. Now, as we wait for questions, I want to come back to you, David. Something I found really, really interesting is that, and as Yvonne was saying, we need to take up and we need to be responsible around our electoral infrastructure, both online and offline, but particularly online. But something I found really interesting is that sometimes in some African countries, that 50% of the influencers are not even based within the continent. And remember, that's how they're able to influence voters. So they're influencing voters without necessarily casting a vote directly, but they are outside the continent. Well, someone from the Ministry of ICT or government would easily say, we need to protect our digital sovereignty. And so let's, ban X or Facebook because we have external actors, or let's shut down the internet during elections, which of course is not a solution. So the question to you is, seeing as the report is actually seeing, we have actors outside the continent that are influencing elections, how do we balance that, digital sovereignty versus, not taking extreme measures like internet shutdowns? What would you say around that?
Thanks a lot. And I'm glad we got to this point in this conversation. When we talk about digital sovereignty, it seems artificial intelligence brought that terminology to the fore, where we now talk about sovereignty because we are dealing with a technology that we believe is very powerful, or it amplifies a lot of sentiment around sovereignty and keeping your own house in order, when it comes to digital. But this research is showing us that before we even go to specific technologies, social media, especially in the application of it in, election, is first of all supposed to bring about conversation of sovereignty, especially when we have people who actually does the micro-targeting and also the people who power the algorithm, they are seated outside of the continent, right? So a number of things we need to do, and the sovereignty here, we need to talk about practical solutions. And this is not just the role of the government, it's also the role of the civil society organizations and social justice organizations and technology companies, and also the collaboration of government to be able to put our house in order when it comes to this conversation. Number one thing is, working on indigenous language, natural language processing, and content ecosystem. And what do I mean by this? When platforms cannot moderate or recommend content, political content in Pidgin or in Yoruba, or in Amharic, or in Kenya, Rwanda, right? Or in Lingala, they will have to work with those who already control that ecosystem within different countries, right? When you cannot target people, when the language corpus with which you do your micro-targeting and political disenfranchisement, when your algorithms cannot power that originally from your end, you need to work with the custodians of those technology stacks, right? And it brings a whole lot of new conversation into sovereignty and also negotiation about data, especially when it comes to language spectrums. You can't do, algorithm-powered political ads or, micro-targeting with either negative sentiment or positive sentiment because it goes both ways. Algorithms can whitewash a candidate. Algorithm can, present a candidate to you as the most evil possible, right? So it's good both ways. And you use the instrument of language for you to be able to do that. So if there's any conversation on sovereignty within AI ecosystem, I think it's much more important that with election conversations, we pay attention to it, right? So one of the solutions is building language infrastructure that reclaims narratives, really, right? Because the truth is that as many of us on the call who have done research on low-resourced African languages, we can see a lot of the challenges that comes with, agglutinization of our languages, and also how most of our language corpuses are not represented in mainstream technology stacks. And this is an opportunity. If we are not thinking of any reason why we need to pay attention to that work, this is a reason why we need to do it. I also think the African fact-checking, system is so scattered. If we imagine that we have an African integrated fact-checking networks where fact-checking, systems across different countries. Many of us on the call as organizations, we run fact-checking platforms that we deploy during elections, during protests, during major political milestones in our different countries. But imagine that we have a connected infrastructure for fact-checking. We'll be able to pick micro-targeting faster. We'll be able to pick a lot of electoral disenfranchisement information and content faster on different platforms. But if we still run them and that's why I like that the civic space, we are now talking to one another to see how infrastructures can connect. And you can see that maybe infrastructure is written more than 1,000 times in that report because whoever owns infrastructure controls the value chain these days, right? So if we can have not one country, not, in Nigeria alone, for example, there are more than maybe 20 organizations that have different fact-checking platforms. And they deploy these different tools during the same election, and the systems don't speak to one another. And we still miss a lot of things that we were not able to capture in different locations. Imagine that we have an integrated continent-wide fact-checking platforms. You imagine the kind of signals that we can pick. I also think that there's a need for algorithmic transparency requirements during elections by government and holding big techs accountable to what are the things that their platforms are going to be doing during elections. I think it's very important. The opportunity for countries to see that during elections, the algorithm that they were using to watch a comedy yesterday night is not the same on the day of election, or the same algorithm that was recommending a wristwatch to you is not the same one that will be running on your devices when campaign starts, right? And when election is 90 days away, when it's 50 days away, when it's 30 days away. When you, I've studied a little bit of micro-targeting, and it's so funny that the content an iPhone user sees is different from what another device owner sees, because there's also some economic micro-targeting. There's a form of, information on political content that goes to the people, the algorithmic, custodians see as elites, and those that they see as low-income earners, right? And that's the power of micro-targeting, because you are sitting on the data, financial behavior data of people. You are sitting on the time of conversation or the type of conversation people have. You're also sitting on the type of social network analysis in terms of who mentions you and who you mention, the type of people that comment on whatever you write. All of those goes into the kind of information that you are being targeted with, right? So I think it's the responsibility of the government, but civil society organizations to also hold big techs accountable to algorithmic transparency during election periods, right? I also think that data localization for electoral data specifically during election is very important. And I know a number of countries in Africa are pushing for localization of data, right? It's so funny that all our internet data, sits several miles away. All the data we are generating sits across the sea away from where we are, right? So it still boils down to the seriousness of different countries or electoral bodies on investing in infrastructure that helps us create transparent systems that helps us see what big techs or different platforms are doing during election and the type of data being used for electoral and public contesting advertisement during election, and also the opportunity to have domiciled, electoral data on the continent or in the country. And this is not limited to, it's not even Africa alone that is facing this challenge. It cuts across different parts of the world. I think these are some of the solutions that I think we need to be intentional about.
I think you've really thought about it. If I gave you 10 more minutes, you'd still give solutions, which is fantastic, but save the rest for a bit later. Really, really loved what you said. I'm having so much fun in this conversation. When you mentioned economic micro-targeting, I've never thought about it like that. I only think of political micro-targeting, particularly during elections. So there's so many layers to this discussion. And just before I let you go, I see there's a question here from Olebile. If I've butchered your name, I apologize. But they're asking whether there was any power analysis that was conducted in the report. So when you're talking about, and you've said infrastructure is power, but when you're talking about elections and the digital space, who claims more power? Is there, have you attempted to do any power mapping in this? If not, it's fine.
No, so that's a very good question, and thanks to the person that asked. Without doing any specific power analysis, the report already shows who has the power. Whoever controls the data controls, has more power. And it's true in every situation. Whoever can manipulate every bit of data. And, when we talk about data for human manipulation, we're talking about how you can, from one human social media data, you can do data transfusion of more than other 50 million people. A social network analysis, it is what it is. From one person connected to me, I know the next person connected to this person, connected to this person, and you can map the ideological spectrum or the ideological, compartments of 10 million people by just having few access to few social media data, and you've seen this in most of the social media micro-targeting scandals, right? So it's a very powerful situation where those who sit with the data controls the whole value chain. It's like me having a remote control for you, and the last question you asked around, should we shut down the internet because somebody's trying to micro-target us, with our data? No, it's like you cutting your head because somebody played rough with your hair, right? We need to find a solution, right? And the truth is that power plays there, and who owns the data control the value chain, and that's the truth. But can we have a situation where you are not having unnecessary control over our data, because we also have our boundaries into our compound, and you cannot just do unnecessary even scraping of our data. I think sometimes when we talk about power play with data, sometimes I used to feel we should be able to add code a country's web presence, where we add code all our web presence that nobody can point any satellite to us to scrape any data. But it's not possible, right? But it's very important that we have and this is a commitment when we look at some of the digital framework for sovereignty in the EU. I think they've been able to make some progress on this, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for us in that space as well, especially within the context of human rights when it comes to electoral freedom as an electorate, and you are not manipulated to think otherwise about a candidate or not, or the kind of information you get. about even involving yourself in your civic duty as a voter in your country.
Thank you so much. You're right. I have thoughts around it, but I want to bring back Yvonne. You had started talking about electoral bodies, and from the findings, I'm curious to hear what are some of the solutions that you think they can implement immediately. So that's the electoral bodies, also different representatives from different ministries of government. And this is really important because we have more countries preparing for elections. I know Nigeria will go into elections next year. Kenya will also go into elections next year. Today is in a few days, Ethiopia is going to the polls on 1st June. That's on Monday. So, what are some of the tangible things that you can share with electoral bodies that they need to implement as a matter of urgency?
All right, thank you very much. I think Sean said a lot, but I'll just write on the back of what Oluwaseun has said that making the unseen electorate visible is no longer optional, like you can see from the report. It's a central part of protecting our election and election integrity in Africa. Um, for instance, you see a lot of internet shutdown across countries where elections are being held, especially in Africa, as a way of trying to stem the effect of digital harms, which is not really what it's supposed to be. Like Oluwaseun said, we need a lot of investment in the way our data is being managed in Africa, content moderation. We need to take into cognizance the language lacuna that we have. Africa has a lot of languages that needs to be considered in terms of reaching the electorates where they are. Because if, for instance, election campaigns are being done in just major languages, a section of the electorate are being left behind if the language is not being considered. So for me, I would say electoral management bodies need to first address, the lacuna that exists in terms of how they understand this digital harm. A lot of literacy needs to be done because most of these electoral management bodies do not even understand what algorithms are and how they really affect outcomes of election, and even how the deployment of digital tools in election affects either citizens' participation or engagement. So there needs to be a framework in electoral management bodies across the different countries, which can also, narrow down to how they engage with AU and other organs in the African Union to ensure that algorithm and all the digital caused by social media is addressed in their frameworks. And also there needs to be a lot of African language investment and education in terms of citizens. How do citizens engage? What constitutes this digital harm? How do you engage in a right respectful way in online on social media? We see a lot of countries going into elections, but election management body are not investing in literacy. They are just concerned about the actual voting day, which is not supposed to be. Voting does not happen the day of the election. It's a process. So if you miss a section of the process, for instance, a lot of people are left behind. So election management body must consider every step in the electoral process to ensure that the harm that stems from engaging with social media is being nipped in the bud, and there is inclusivity in how people are carried along, how citizens are carried along to ensure that African election, see more engagement and voters turnout, because that is one issue that the continent is battling with right now. If you look at the last three election cycles in most countries, you will see that there is a sharp decline in citizens' participation in election. Most citizens don't even care. But you see a lot of engagement in the digital space and you're feeling, oh, okay, that means the youth are being carried along. But that is just a fraction of the youth population, also because of the digital divide that exists. So there has to also be a lot of investments in internet connectivity, which countries must also adopt to ensure that no one is left behind, that the unseen electorate are beginning to be seen. across the continent and how election is being carried out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Let me also just stick with you for a minute. There's someone, Paul, who says that, in fact, in his rural community, a majority of the voters do not have access to mobile internet. So does this entire conversation about algorithms somehow affect them directly or indirectly?
Yes, it does affect them because a lot of communities are still out of internet connectivity. So it's not just the electoral management body, the government itself must invest in, a lot of digitization, a lot of access to internet, and also data in communities that are left behind. If, for instance, campaigns are being done, and citizens are being left behind is a concern. So I agree with his question. A lot of citizens are being left behind, but there is a need to invest, in internet connectivity and access in rural communities so that nobody is left unseen, nobody is left behind in the electoral process and in the development of Africa and the continent in particular.
Let me double click on that. And Moses just responded on point to what I wanted to say. The fact that a set of people are not online does not mean that they cannot be influenced with the majority of the conversation online. The people who go to the rural areas for campaigns are people who have access to, most of them, digital tools. And they've been conditioned to a particular narrative via digital channels. They are going to take that message to the rural areas, right? And the people who are not online are not able to see things for themselves, whether to make a decision on whether what the algorithm is saying to them is right or not. They are not even in the playing field at all. They are just given one set of information from those who have been shaped by by digital already, right? So that opportunity to even make up your mind whether you are being micro-targeted or not is not there for the people in the rural area. So once you are, as Moses has put it, once you have been, once you have influenced the majority that are online, they are able to take that message to those that are offline as well. So it's about how algorithm is amplifying a major narrative, whether positive or negative, and how that translates to grassroots and rural areas as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, and thank you so much, Moses and Paul, for your question. I agree 100%. And within the African context, politics is still very local. So if one or a few people are influenced by whatever, sort of algorithms or technology, we at the end of the day sit by the fire, and a discussion will spark, and you may, as a family, decide to vote for a particular candidate, right? So I found that to be quite interesting. I'm about to come to you, Movin. And before, I had a set of questions for you, but someone here asked Guy. Hi, Guy. How relevant was personalization in creating different feeds, including political ads? So you're talking about, creating accounts and selecting, what content you'd like to see. I think that's what he's asking. So how relevant was that sort of personalization in creating different feeds, including political ads? So, or how successful was that?
Thanks. I hope I'm guessing that's my question. So actually, I addressed it earlier. That's why we said we divided them into political. So people wanted to prefer political content generally, selected extremely very political preferences. Remember, because we used X as the study subject, basically. Remember, when you're on X, immediately register an account and given an opportunity to select preferences. So maybe some people select lifestyle, entertainment, and all that stuff. So what we did, because we wanted to clearly see the correlation between also preferences, whether it will actually influence the algorithms, positioning towards your account, we made some of the accounts select one of the per country, actually basically 4 of them select extremely political stuff like rallies, campaigns, those things that you cannot distinguish from politics. Then another set selected things that are extremely remote from politics, like someone saying they're interested in nature or they're interested in pets. You see, connecting a cat and politics, you really have to work hard on that. So what we discovered is that, in fact, as a matter of fact, the algorithm still sent you political content. That's why we say the algorithm, social media algorithm, especially the X algorithm, is by nature inherently political. So that's why I said earlier, it doesn't really matter if you say you don't care about politics. You'll still get to see a lot of political content. I hope that answers your question. So when you have an opportunity to look at the report, you'll actually see those statistics there. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Movin. And there are a few people who've asked whether they can have access to the report. Immediately after this launch, we will share the link for you to delve deeper, read deeper, interact with the findings. So stick around for that. But the question I have for you is also similar in terms of solutions, because it's one thing for us to complain and say these things are not working, but you've been part of the study from the get-go. As you're reading through, as an active citizen, as a voter, what are some of the policy solutions you would recommend, as someone who's been in the process and you've seen the negatives? So how can we fix this? What are some of the policy recommendations that you would propose?
Yes, thank you so much, Miriam. So I think I have two issues I would handle as a matter of urgency. The first one being messaging apps. In Africa, WhatsApp and Telegram are actually literally, someone called them the real dirt matches happening there. So what we realize that algorithms normally push content around X and other social media platforms. But this content actually, their landing zone is actually WhatsApp or WhatsApp inboxes. And the challenge with these particular platforms is that you are not even able to essentially moderate them. So I think we need to co-create solutions, and governments and technology companies need to co-create solutions on how to moderate these in ways that are non-intrusive but can still solve the problem. Because even the question that was raised earlier about rural communities, majority of them actually rely on either information on Facebook or WhatsApp. So, and I think Sean hit the point, the nail on the head when he said that most of these people, the moment they get something on WhatsApp, they don't even question, they just share it around. So you can imagine someone is not on IG or X, and you think the algorithm that is working on X will not get to them. It actually gets to them actually. So we need to figure out that part out, and I think this will require the governments and the civil society actually directly approaching Meta and Telegram, because the two major platforms are actually Telegram, WhatsApp, and trying to figure out how this can happen. I think right now they're trying to put measures, for example, if you overshare something, they actually kind of highlight it so that you know that this thing has been shared a lot of time. But they're only working on frequency. They don't look at the content itself. So that is still a lacuna, as they say it. Then something else which will also look at keenly is AI, because what AI is doing, as I said, the Gini coefficient is actually 78%. What that means is that few accounts actually control 78% of the content. And what people used to do by relying on human beings in the past, you can right now literally produce like millions of posts through AI. So that means that if I really want to share some stuff that is, let's say, propaganda, it's very easy. All I need to do is to get myself a very powerful AI tool or a bot or something and actually generate as much stuff as possible and push them. And what algorithm will basically do, it will amplify, because it will look at the trend. You'll see that you're producing a lot of content, make them as negative as possible, as we said earlier, and then probably pay for the ads, because when you pay for an ad, for example, on Instagram, and they always even give you rates. If you want your ad to reach 1 million people, pay this amount. And then once you are able to pay that amount and you're actually using AI, bots or whichever tool, think about it, deepfakes, all stuff. So actually there's a very close link between AI and algorithms. And I think when we interact with the reports, we'll be able to see how the link is working in that regard. Yeah. So I think those are the areas that I wanted us to really think about AI and the messaging apps and how we can actually action it. Yeah, thanks.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Moving. Who would have thought I would ever use the phrase Gini coefficient in a meeting? The last time I heard that word was back in, I think, very many years ago when I was a student. But who would have thought? Who would have thought? Thank you for those remarks. I want to come back to you, David, as we are beginning to wrap up. And if there's anyone who has a question, feel free to raise your hand, your virtual hand. We will see you. We'll give you an opportunity to either ask a question to anyone. But don't ask yet until I choose you, or we ask you to speak. Adewere, you can help me mute a few participants. So just giving you an opportunity. We'll hear from David and then we'll come back to the last set of questions. Conversations in Kenya, we really like to say mine is not a question, but but a comment. So even if yours is not a question but a comment, we are happy to hear your thoughts around it. So just start preparing. But David, we've spoken about, and I said this intentionally, this second phase of our discussion is about solutions. We've talked about electoral management bodies, we've talked about CSOs, we've talked about governments, but I do think that technology companies also have a role to play, because this is their platforms that we are using. So because they do have a role to play, how then should we keep them accountable, and what obligations do they have to ensure our electoral digital platform, or space is hygienic, if at all?
It's a very complex question, for two reasons. Number one, some of the big tech platforms that we use, especially the big social media platforms, these are companies that are not registered in our domains, but they are global companies that operate across board, right? And it's very hard to put one hammer to hit one nail on the head, and we believe it has solved the problem across board, right? And also, these are companies who have operated for many years. Many of them, I'm sure when the founders of some of these big platforms were starting those platforms, they never thought that one day they would become so powerful to the point where their platform can actually influence elections in countries. That's how technology is. They were not thinking about it. I'm sure they were not starting a technology company or a social media platform that influences elections. But because these platforms is where human interaction happens, and this is where agenda and propaganda can be channeled through, there's no how you want to do it that such platforms will not get into the mix of election influencing. Let's put it that way. These platform companies don't have, they will tell you they don't have the maybe prerogative or the will to be transparent to you in different contexts, right? And these are also, we're also navigating very murky waters of legal, what's that adjective? Legal jargons when it comes to some of these issues. For those people that play in the accountability space, you understand what I mean better, where you are coming from an angle. And that's why for us as working in the civic space, we need to do more research to have evidence, right? I've been in rooms where, and this was a conference I went for in Norway recently, where some activists, digital rights activists from the continent were contributing in the room where we were talking about the influence of artificial intelligence on children. And I can tell you that many of them were saying things that even me, I can't understand. They were fighting for the right of kids and the influence of artificial intelligence on them. And this was a room filled with big techs, right? And my takeaway from that session was that you cannot fight the developers of a technology with the shallow knowledge of the technology itself. And this is a challenge. I'm pushing this challenge to all of us that call ourselves activists and civil society organization. We cannot afford to go to the table with big techs with shallow knowledge. They will laugh at us because we don't know jack about what we are talking about. And we must move away from emotional activism to knowledge-based and evidence-based activism. Many of us are emotional-based activists where children are dying in Congo. Elections are being manipulated in Kenya. Electorate are being disenfranchised in Namibia. We heard you. It happened. What is the foundational knowledge that you can bring to the fore to make us talk at the same level? Because the people who build the technology, they are 10 years ahead of us. That's the truth. They are already building a new product they will sell to us or a new algorithm that will manipulate a thing in the next 15 years. So we cannot afford emotional activism, really. So number one thing that I believe we should do is that, yes, we should continue to hold big techs accountable, but we must go to that table with data, not emotions. I think it's very important. Big techs have laughed at us for so long because sometimes we don't understand what we're talking about. So as an activist, you must also endeavor to understand how the technology itself works. If we ask some activists who are holding big techs accountable, what is micro-targeting? They cannot explain it because they don't even understand how the algorithm works itself. And this knowledge is available. We should go with knowledge because if we are not operating at the same frequency, we cannot come to a negotiation table about anything. Number two thing would be in terms of some of these platforms, sometimes they will come up with micro grants or grants for us to do a work. But there's an opportunity to co-create what that money should do, right? If we've called out big techs over time around accountability and transparency, you would see that in the next few months, there'll be a grant of 150K, 200K to do some transparency work, but on their own agenda. And we've seen situations where the ecosystem pushed back to say, nobody's applying for this grant if this grant is not going into doing this actual work that we called you out for, right? So also that stability of balance between do we want the money or we want to do legacy work, right? So it's also very important that we hold that position. Any other thing I'm going to say here on what we need to do with big techs, there's nothing I want to say that some of us have not done. But those two things I've just mentioned are the things that are recent discoveries for me and that we must pay attention to as people working in the civic space and people working in digital rights.
Thank you so much, David. Some of us were catching stray bullets. Emotional activists. Is that what you said? Emotional activists. Well, it's fine. You can be emotional about it, but at least bring some data. That's my takeaway. Brilliant, brilliant. And also just a call to action, especially civil society organizations, tough times. So it really requires a lot to say, no, hold back your money a little bit, or be open-minded so that we can shape the narrative together. If you have a question or a comment, this would be your time. Adeboro is on the lookout to see whether there are any hands going up. There's someone I saw who I know personally, and they've been doing some fantastic research work, but I think they've dropped. I have invited him to actually give a testimony or testament on whether, going to big tech with data actually helps, but I think they've dropped off. Adeboro, do you see any hands or any questions on the chat?
No, I don't see any hands. I think all the questions on the chat have been addressed. I don't know if you've addressed Guy's question on how algorithms responded to the engagement, but I think yes, you have. Okay, that's the only
Yes.
one. Yeah, every other one has been addressed.
Okay, wonderful. Then my panelists have done a fantastic job at answering all the questions that we don't have anymore. But I think you would have a lot of probably feedback after you've gone through the report. I urge all of us to go through the report, which will be shared after this. What I'm really finding interesting, and just to answer Guy's question on how, the algorithms or the algorithms responded, what Movin said, that it doesn't really matter if you are a cat mom or a cat dad and you say you're not interested in politics, politics is still interested in you. I found that to be really, really interesting. And that's how the system has been set from the ground up. Okay, so that said, in case a question comes to you during this time in the next couple of minutes, feel free to drop it in the chat. But I will give 1 or 2 minutes each to Movin, Yvonne, and David. Those were just my questions. Maybe I asked questions that or I missed something that you really want to talk about, as also you're giving your parting shot, closing remarks. If you have social media accounts that we can follow you and DM for further questions, feel free to share. But this will be an opportunity for you to give closing remarks. I'll start with Yvonne, and well done again on the report.
Thank you very much, Miriam, for injustice.
We are losing you.
Okay.
I don't know if it's just from my end. You're breaking a bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. So I was saying thank you, Mariam, for the wonderful moderation, and to my co-speakers for doing justice to the topic. It's been a very insightful session and knowledge sharing session. In conclusion, I would like to say that there is need for more investment in literacy across all the rights, from the electorates, to the government, and also to election management body, because if you're not knowledgeable about what it is you're fighting for, you can't really call for transparency or accountability. And there's also a need also to ensure that the category of electorate, especially the elderly and first-time voters, are well educated enough to know how they contribute to digital arms, especially around election. So that's my takeaway.
Thank you so much, Yvonne, for your time and putting together the report and your reflections during this conversation. Okay, Mr. Gini Coefficient, any parting shots? You can shock us with another technical term.
I'm saving the rest for next time. But thank you so much, Miriam, for a wonderful conversation. I actually wanted to give a very big shout to Moses Kyoko, who was the data analyst brain behind this. I think if someone deserves the name Gini Coefficient, it should be him. I'd also like to give a big shout out to Aditya Disanya, who's also the co-author of this report, and of course George Tieno, Yvonne, and Deborah, who were editors, as well as Dr. Sheon, who was leading this whole process for the entire team. One thing I'd like to say as a last statement, I think there's something Sheon mentioned that I would like to put a bit more weight on. I think the platforms from conversations with multiple people in terms of African specific issues, there is something that we still have to really face, which is the socioeconomic dynamics of the world, basically. So, for example, it is different from a consortium of African CSOs when they approach platforms to work on some of these constraints we have actually highlighted, because basically for platforms that return on investment, I think if you look at ad revenues for most platforms, they probably get less than 5% from Africa. And that is normally one of the biggest arguments for them, why they may not, in the immediate term, it may change in the future, invest extensively in things like what Sean was proposing, language, content moderation, and that is a major issue that we have to face. And especially it will worsen if countries decide to go individual. So I think it would be a smart move for the African Union the African Union as a whole to think about how they can actually button up together. I think Sean said something very important, how almost everyone, a lot of people actually are doing content moderation, trying to look at what is happening, following up these issues independently. But it will actually strengthen the case if the entire African Union was actually to approach Meta and Telegram. Because while they may not they'll still give the idea of revenues are not matching up, but I think the political strength of the entire continent can actually have some effect. So I think the socioeconomic dynamics of generally the world, as it is, geopolitical still seep into the maybe I can call it geotechnology, whereby platforms, if you're like country like Kenya, you are raising, like Uganda has banned Facebook for the last 5 years, Meta doesn't even care. So that just, if it was Germany, they would have actually resolved that issue. So that tells you why you also need that banding together. I think that will be all. Thank you so much for time.
Thank you very much, Movin, and well done on everything you've your time and skills and resources you've put towards the report. Okay, David, parting shots.
Yeah, technology is an enabler, and you don't have control of what what you are targeted with on social media. I think that would be my parting words. We are influenced every day. Before you wake up, somebody has thought about the new set of content that will be pushed to you. So this conversation is not whether you like it or not. It's happening in real time as we are speaking. Just mention wristwatch for 5 times now. By the time you get on your Instagram, you'll see wristwatch companies advertising to you. So they are listening, and you need to know how to use social media and use your own mind to make decision on what is for you and what is not for you. And also to thank Moses Kiyoko, who did the data work on this research. I think it's really a great job. Adetayo, who also contributed to a lot of synthesis of the data. Thanks to both of you. They're on the call with us. Thanks for a great job. With your work, we have this final product that the ecosystem can engage with. Thank you. Back to you, Miriam.
Thank you very much, Dr. David. Should address you properly. Thank you for the insights. I want to give the last 5 minutes to Adeboro and the AIRA team to officially launch the report and let us know where we can access, the full report and materials. But I've really, really learned so much, and I have engaged. Okay, just looking at the comments. Yeah, it was fantastic moderating this conversation. I have some key takeaways that I'll just share with you. Because as Africans, we just really need to, this is the problem, these are the solutions. And some of the fantastic things that have been shared here is we need to, as a continent, build language infrastructure in a way to reclaim our identity. And also, think through African fact-checking systems that can be deployed during major political events such as, elections, and push really for algorithmic transparency by big tech, particularly during elections. Another thing that really came out, quite loudly is the issue around data and data localization, particularly during elections. And what David was saying is that whoever controls data has the power. So something for all of us to think about in this call. And then electoral bodies and election management bodies really need to invest in literacy, in as much as they focus a lot on political education, literacy on misinformation, disinformation, and all these negative attributes that we are seeing coming up. They need to invest on that. And we need more research and evidence so that as we're getting, we're meeting on the table and we're negotiating, we need more evidence, we need more research. And really, you cannot fight with shallow knowledge, as we've been told. And I think such reports, this report that we are launching today, is one way of ensuring that we are coming from an informed point and we are negotiating from an informed point. I really liked the solution on co-creating so that we're not just taking and implementing. Co-creating when we are invited through funds, and whatever space that we co-create, and we ensure that our needs are heard and are taken care of. I really liked what Movin said, and that's what I'll end with, that we need to really bargain as a collective. Our voice is louder if we negotiate and bargain from, an African level, can be the African Union or our different regional economic blocks, because we need to remember that we are a huge, huge market for tech platforms. I think if we implemented even 50 or 80% of this, we will have solved close to all our problems that we are witnessing when it comes to elections in the digital age. That said, it was a pleasure moderating this conversation. Enjoy your read as you go through the report. Well done again to everyone who's contributed to putting together the report. My name is Miriam Petrus Wanjiru. I work with Paradigm Initiative as the Programs Officer for East Africa. If you meet me anywhere in the streets of Nairobi or whatever city in Africa or on LinkedIn, say hi. I wish you a fantastic weekend ahead. And for the Kenyans, happy Madaraka Day on Monday. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Miriam, for that wonderful moderation. You made it look very easy, but moderation is an art. So thank you so much for carrying the conversation really fantastically. And thank you to the speakers. Thank you to Dr. Sheun. Thank you to Yvonne. Thank you to Movin and the other researchers who were not on the panel but contributed to this fantastic piece of work. Thank you. I'm so grateful. So many notes that I was just taking. So many notes, so many. I resonated with a lot of things that were said. AIRA, for instance, has been echoing and chanting that we need to bargain as a collective. That's the very reason we exist. Coming together as stakeholders to say, you know what's our thoughts on this, and how can we use our collective power to get the best outcome from every negotiation. So thank you so much. Like Miriam said, if we did just half of all the recommendations that CC Hub has put forth, I think it will be a better better experience for us as people who vote, as countries, as politicians even. And like Dr. Sheun said, I would say there is a place for emotions in activism, but honestly, emotional activism without knowledge-based activism it's just a quick flame that won't last, right? Because the deeper you go, the deeper you need to know. And the more you want to make your impact sustainable, the more you need to know. And that said, read our report. Thank you for attending the report launch, but it's not complete until you actually engage with the report, until you actually read it, until you actually share it, until you actually, you can use it as a material, until you give the staff in your company as the weekend read or whatever, right? But read it, engage with it. Feel free to reach out to CC Hub or to AIRA if you want to explore any other forms of ways that we can push this and communicate it and share it and really just spotlight all the information within the report. Also be on the lookout on CC Hub's social media platforms as well as LinkedIn and their website, and AIRA social media platforms, our LinkedIn, our websites for more activities around this reports. Once again, on behalf of the African Internet Rights Alliance and all of our members, I'd like to say thank you for joining our report launch. The report is hereby launched and the link is in the chat. It's Friday. It's a good time to say bye and great time to wish you all a wonderful weekend ahead. Have a lovely day. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you so much.